Today on the Healthful Pursuit Podcast,
we expect ourselves to like flip a switch and all of a sudden never have a craving again. Like to me, a craving is a really good sign that our body is responding to life and that it is communicating with us.
welcome to another episode. My name is Leanne, and thanks for hanging out with me today. I was reviewing the notes for today's show, just preparing for recording the intro and just putting together today's episode because I do all this myself. I have an amazing editor who I love so much. He's listening to this. Thank you so much for doing what you do. But all the other stuff I do. And it's just so cool to see this podcast has over 30 million downloads. And this just blows my mind. It blows my mind. It blows my mind. And here you are listening, and we're going to be talking about cravings and how to deal with them and our relationship with food. One of my most favorite topics. Today, we are just joined by the fabulous Jenn Trepeck, who's an optimal health coach, business consultant, and the host of Salad with a Side of Fries podcast. Now, I will say that I am a very big believer in the salad with a side of fries. That's kind of my go-to when we go to the restaurants. So I love that podcast name. Jenn has spent over a decade helping people take control of their health by teaching the science of cravings, the connection between food and mood, and how to approach nutrition in a practical, sustainable way. In this episode, Jenn unpacks the biochemical reasons behind the cravings that we're experiencing, the mistakes many women make when intermittent fasting, and how to measure real progress. I'm so excited, and I hope that you're ready for an enlightening conversation where Jenn is very careful about the words that she uses to explain what's going on with how you think about food and your cravings. Let's cut over to today's episode with Jenn. Hey, my name is Leanne, and I'm fascinated with helping women navigate how to eat, move, and care for their bodies. This has taken me on a journey from vegan, keto, high protein to everything in between. I'm a small town holistic nutritionist turned 3-time international bestselling author turned functional medicine practitioner, offering telemedicine services around the globe to women looking to better their health and stop second guessing themselves. I'm here to teach you how to wade through the wellness noise to get to the good stuff that'll help you achieve your goals. Whether you're seeking relief from chronic ailments, striving for peak performance, or simply eager to live a more vibrant life, this podcast is your go-to resource for actionable advice and inspiration. Together, we'll uncover the interconnectedness of nutrition, movement, sleep, stress management, and mindset, empowering you to make informed choices that support your unique health journey. Think of it as quality time with your bestie mixed with a little med school so you're empowered at your next doctor visit. Get ready to be challenged and encouraged while you learn about your body and how to care for it healthfully. Join me as we embrace vitality, reclaim our innate potential, and discover what it truly means to pursue healthfulness. Hey, Jenn, how's it going?
Hi, I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah. We're going to talk about one of the biggest things that ladies are probably dealing with right now, which is cravings. And before we get into the nitty gritty, what's happening, why it's happening, why don't we start off by you telling us a little bit about why you do what you do and what lights you up in this work?
Yeah. Well, thank you for that question because I think so, I don't know that everybody wants to hear like the whole story, right? But long story short, I grew up a dancer. Everybody in my family was like on some diet my whole life. So by extension, I was on a diet my whole life because that's just the food that was around. And then I started to gain weight between high school and college. And I was like, okay, I know what to do. And so I did every diet under the sun like my family did. And, I thought that's just what it was. It was always going to be a thing. And this is how you live your life. And it's this roller coaster of feeling such highs and such lows and kind of always being at odds with your body, or I should say always feeling like I was at odds with my body. And I graduated from business school at the University of Michigan. I moved to New York. This was now quite a while ago, but I share that timeline because I was looking for something to do outside of my full-time job where eventually I would just be my own boss. And I really didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew that I like couldn't work for somebody else for the rest of my life. And then worlds collided when I learned about the curriculum that I've since based my entire practice on. And I felt like through this curriculum, I learned the nutrition education we're all supposed to know and no one ever taught us. It's like this thing. It's actually a lot like money. Like we're expected to know this stuff, but nobody really ever sits down and is like, here's what happens, or like, here's how we want to choose things or whatever. So when I felt this weight lifted, like I felt like I had kicked my food issues and this was the key things. Like I learned this information that made these food decisions go from being emotional of like, why do I suck? Why can't I just not eat the croissant in the breakfast, in the kitchen at work for breakfast, to like, oh, I get why the croissant has a voice right now. What I actually need to do is this. And then lo and behold, like the croissant doesn't have a voice anymore. And so I was like, okay, this is my thing. This is what I'm going to do because I was like, everybody deserves this. And then I was like, well, why isn't this what we learned? And how did all of those things come to be? And I'm an insatiable student. So in that evolution of working with clients, so this was back in 2007, I became a health coach on the side of my full-time job. So this is like before health coaching was a thing, before side hustles were a thing. It was like, and I started to dig into all of this. And every time something would come up, I learned enough about the body to know that there's a biochemical reason for everything. And so I just kept learning and digging and understanding differently all the things that we experience and a lot of the things that we experience that we think are like some failure on our part. And so long story long, I'm here to tell you all, and what lights me up in this world is to help everybody know that like you haven't failed. Everything out there has failed you, and the body is always doing exactly what it's supposed to do. We have to learn the language of the body, and we have to start to understand what it's telling us through the things that we're experiencing. And so it's been how many years? I can't even do that math of how many years, like 17 years. And, I launched, my podcast is called Salad with a Side of Fries. So I launched that in 2019 when I left my full-time job because I just believe that everybody needs this information. And so here we are.
That's so awesome. The only reason I knew it was 17 because I studied nutrition in 2008 before it was cool, before there were health coaches, before there was a side hustle. Yeah, exactly. And I feel like a dinosaur in this industry because so many people are getting into it and it's so exciting. And I agree with you. The same struggles that we have with health is so similar to money. Like my husband and I, we're kind of at that age where we're starting to think of retirement. And we're like, well, how much money do we need? And how do you manage that money? And like, what's enough? And then how do you use that money? And how do you, like, we didn't learn any of this in school. And it's the same thing with nutrition. Like I learned so many things that I can't remember. It would be good to learn how to like manage your life, and food is a huge aspect of that. Emotional connection in just interactions, relationship with food, especially finances, like these are key things. And I couldn't agree with you more. I could not agree with you more.
I have a couple episodes on it if people are like curious to dig into that, because it is like, again, I'm like, this is so connected. And it's wild how similar these things are. And for some people, it's easier to deal with the money thing than it is the food thing. So we can use it as the proxy. We can start to make some of these changes in one area, and it helps us make some shifts elsewhere, but it's easier, and then for other people, it's easier to start with the food part and then look at the money part. But yeah, I love it.
I would say it's easier for me to work through the food part. The money part, there's so much in that, but it's so true. I've never tied the two together, but that makes a lot of sense. Now, in your introduction, you were saying like you went from diet to diet to diet. What's the alternative? What are you suggesting? Like, what do you personally do now? What are you coaching on? Is it a diet or what is it? What's the alternative for people?
It's understanding how food impacts the body, what our body does with food, what our body needs, and learning to read labels and just making choices. So fundamentally on the food side, like we're not counting calories, we're not counting macros, we may count like servings or handfuls of things in a day. But I felt when I did all those other things that made me count all the things, it made me nutty. So it's really the fundamental sort of piece of food choices is about understanding glycemic impact of our food choices. And the thing that I say to everybody, for all the note takers, here's your cheat sheet. Protein and fiber at every meal makes removing fat no big deal. So protein is clean, lean protein. Fiber is vegetables and sometimes fruit. And a meal is really any time we eat. The only difference between a meal and a snack is how much we have at a time, and then therefore how long till we need to fuel again. And then the other thing that you want every day is a couple servings of quality fat. And one day I will figure out how to get all of that into the sentence. But
I feel like
the rhyme works without the quality fat. I know.
Exactly. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So we talked about protein, the fiber, quality fat. That is not a new topic on this podcast. So I'm guessing it's like avocados, macadamia nuts, like the good healthy fats, not like canola oil mayonnaise.
Exactly. And I will say, like, even with some of that stuff, we want the emphasis to be on omega-3s for a variety of reasons, cognitive health, cardiovascular health, and this is sort of down a rabbit hole, but balancing the ratio of omega-3s to omega-6s in our body is really important. So, I also live in the world of pick your battles and progress over perfection. And, what's a life without fries and dessert and a glass of wine sometimes if you want it? So it's making the choices that work for us in any given scenario every day.
And that's the key piece, and something that really shifted my relationship with food is the choice. Like previously when you were talking about the croissant, sorry, I'm Canadian, so we say croissant and Americans say,
I love it.
How do you say it? Crescent? What do you say?
Croissant.
I
don't know.
Okay.
Now I can't say it.
I
can't say the word.
Croissant? Okay, yeah, croissant. So like it has a voice. And when I realized that I could choose differently, like I could choose how I felt, I could say, well, if I want the croissant, then I know that I'm going to feel a certain way after that. And if I am okay feeling that way, then I'll just choose that thing. Or I could not choose that thing. And that choice is really important. So is that part of it sounds like you're teaching people to eat, basically. And you mentioned a biochemical reason for everything. Is that kind of looped up in that? Like, can you explain the biochemical reason for everything?
Yeah. So there are hormones that drive our body. And when we hear the word hormones, most of the time we think of like estrogen and progesterone and testosterone, like those sex hormones, right? But there are hormones that tell us when we're hungry and when we're satisfied. Those hormones are called ghrelin and leptin. And the same way that we can become insulin resistant, right? We know that to be diagnosed as diabetes. We can become resistant to the hormones that tell us when we're hungry and when we're satisfied. So if you feel like you could go all day without eating and you barely notice, right? You're never hungry in the morning. It takes a good chunk of the day till you have an appetite. We're probably ghrelin resistant. If you feel like, you're not really hungry all day and then you see food and you're insatiable and it's like, oh my God, I can't get enough. Now I realize I haven't eaten anything, right? Or once we have, like, what's the Pringles thing, right? Like once you pop, you can't stop, right? No coincidence, but that's for a slightly different reason, right? But if you have that feeling, right, that's often a sign of being leptin resistant. And then that feeling of, the Pringles, there are actually chemicals in foods, in particular processed foods, right? Or I should call it ultra processed foods, that actually turn off our brain's ability to know when we're full. right? It's triggering a different kind of feedback loop in the body. It hits also different taste buds with every bite. Every chip is formulated to not be exactly the same so that it keeps you going back for more to hit that one spot on your tongue. And in that way, also, when we tend to eat more of the ultra processed foods or the croissant for breakfast, we are eating food, but we are not necessarily getting nutrition. So we actually want to call those things more of like food-like substances, right? When we eat those, the body, digestion, all the things happen, and the body is anticipating things that it knows what to do. It's anticipating nutrients. And when it doesn't get them, there's only certain signals that the body has. Hunger is one of them. And so we can sometimes start to feel hunger or a craving because it's our body telling us it needs nutrients. And so it's not going to turn that off till it gets the nutrients that it needs. So, I mean, there's a lot of different sort of reasons for cravings, right? So one piece that we've talked about is sort of lack of nutrients in the food, chemicals in the food, different hormones, right? By the way, if we don't sleep well, we will be less sensitive to leptin. So again, it's not a coincidence that on days you don't sleep well or days after you don't sleep well, you're like, oh, I'm insatiable today. I cannot get enough food. The sugar sounds the best, right? That's not a coincidence. Stress too also creates cravings, right? And then there's also a piece of this that I think people don't realize, and that is that genetics can not dictate that we will always have cravings, because epigenetics are really powerful, and we can talk about that in a second. But there are some of us genetically who have variations of genes that make us more prone to salt cravings or sugar cravings. With some of these gene variations, you might end up with increased sugar intake in order to satisfy that need for something sweet. So, and if you ever know those people who like start out with 1 Splenda in their coffee and then they're at 2 and then they're at 4, right? And like it keeps growing, it's because our taste buds adjust. And so in order for something to register as sweet or salty, because those are both acquired tastes, right? We need more and more of it for it to register on those taste buds. So there's just a lot of things at play, totally separate from even food that we see, that create cravings or the desires for certain foods that have nothing to do with really like any moral failing of our own. But our experience of that, or what we feel like in that moment, is like something's wrong with us.
If you haven't tried Element's chocolate medley, you're missing out. This limited time trio of chocolate mint, chocolate chai, and chocolate raspberry is the perfect way to enjoy your electrolytes warm this winter. I know it sounds a little bit strange to have electrolytes hot, and I'll admit I was pretty unsure of the idea at first, but now I love it. I enjoy Element with hot water on its own, or in warmed dairy-free milk, or even stirred into my coffee for a little cozy, healthy treat. And if you want to take it to the next level, add a scoop of protein powder. You're welcome. It's a delicious way to stay hydrated without any sugar or artificial ingredients while getting the electrolytes you need, especially for us ladies. Electrolyte balance is key for energy, focus, and overall wellness. You can grab chocolate medley while it's still available over at drinklmnt.com/KDP. And don't forget, with any purchase through my exclusive link, you'll get a free Element sample pack. You can try it completely risk-free. If you don't love it, Element will refund you, no questions asked. That's drinklmnt.com/KDP. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think you're kind of touching on the emotional aspect as well in that last point. Like if a woman, what I'm hearing you say is if a woman is not getting enough sleep, it could be the source of her cravings. And sometimes those basics, like do you find, I know for myself, sometimes I think it's like this crazy complicated situation that I need to unpack. Like, why is this happening to me? And then I don't want to look at basic things like, oh, I'm on my phone right before bed, or I didn't get outside at all, or I didn't drink enough water, like those basic things that aren't that sexy to like start working on.
Well, I want to take it out of the like cause and effect piece because like, yes, and I'm the worst about this. Like I am on my phone, laying in bed before I go to bed and when I wake up in the morning. Like this is a thing that we're all a work in progress, right? So, but the reality is like, I think it can be easier instead of saying, oh, I'm having trouble, figuring out how to solve this complex situation, right? I'm having challenges problem solving because I was looking at my phone last night. Like I don't feel to be as helpful as saying, what if I didn't feel like I had to solve this complex challenge, like by white knuckling it and sort of, gritting through it? What if all I had to do is just make sure I go to bed and wake up at the same time every day? And all of a sudden, other things start to fall into place. Like how can we make everything easier? Like I remember feeling like walking into the kitchen at work for that croissant, right? Like I would be going in the morning to get water from the kitchen, and the continental breakfast would be there. And it would feel like climbing Mount Everest naked and barefoot by the third time I had to go into the kitchen. Like I could go like once and be like, made it, maybe twice. But like by the third time, it was like, why is this so impossible? Right. And then what I learned was that that's appealing because my blood sugar is low. And when my blood sugar is low, right, because it's morning and I haven't eaten anything yet, when our blood sugar is low, our body says, I need fuel. And I need fuel quickly. Well, what's fast fuel but sugar and high glycemic carbohydrates, right? So of course, that croissant is going to look better, right? It's going to have that voice because my body needs fast fuel, or that's what it thinks it needs, right? What I know is that I had this moment. It was like so vivid. Like I walked into the kitchen and I was like, I get why the croissant has a voice. What I actually need is to go eat the breakfast that I brought and then see how I feel about the croissant. Because I could still eat it after, but I wanted to start with the nutrition that I had planned to eat that morning. And lo and behold, after I ate what I brought that day, protein, fiber, quality fat, the croissant didn't have a voice. And I was like, oh, no big deal. They're there, but they don't have voices calling my name. And I think those are sometimes different situations than when we're like sitting on the couch. Like I also remember times in my life where like I'd have a session with my therapist and the next thing I know, I'm eating cookie dough, right? I think those are sort of different scenarios, but both can feel like this moral failing.
And with the second one where you chat with your therapist and then you end up with the cookie dough, that's more of a emotional response to circumstance. Like I know for me, whenever I'm feeling lonely, like loneliness is a big one for me. I always go for the treat that my dad and I used to share together. And I'll be like driving and I'll be like, where do I find these? Like, I need them right now. And then I'll be like, do I actually need them or am I feeling loneliness? And I'm like, yeah, no, that's the feeling of loneliness. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly. But it's a process to get to that point of saying, wait a minute, I'm craving that thing. I bet I'm lonely, right? Like making that connection and getting to that place, and even getting to that place before you've bought the thing, before you've eaten the thing. Like it's so much progress and it's a process to get there. And I think we expect ourselves to like flip a switch and all of a sudden never have a craving again. Like to me, a craving is a really good sign that our body is responding to life and that it is communicating with us. So now we just have to learn what it means. And sometimes, right? By the way, cravings versus hunger. I'll throw this out there for everybody. True hunger, like true stomach hunger, a bunch of different things will sound good. Like, when you're really hungry and you go to the restaurant and you're like, I cannot make a decision. Like there's too many options on the menu. That happens when we're truly stomach hungry. If broccoli doesn't sound good, if you wouldn't eat an apple, then we want to say what's creating the craving, right? Am I craving the sugar because I really didn't eat enough protein today? Do I have this whole thing around late night eating because I'm really under eating in the first half of my day? Or am I really looking for some stress relief, right? Am I really looking to fill this void. Cravings tend to be for a specific food, like you were just saying, that thing that you and your dad used to eat. So cravings tend to be a very specific food. Nothing else is going to satisfy that. And we can also eat the food that we're craving and emotionally eat and still explore what's happening. Like, of course, we have an emotional connection to food, right? Like every culture or religion in the world has a connection to food, whether it's celebration or grief or gathering or anything. I mean, everybody, there's a connection to food. And so I want to make sure that everybody also understands, like, that's not inherently a problem, right? It's something that we might want to explore when we're turning to the food so that we don't have to feel the feelings. Is it to escape? Is it to sort of numb, for lack of a better word, right? I also think, like, sometimes it's not even those things, but especially in our modern lives and post-pandemic, where work is at home for a lot of us, or can be at home for a lot of us, that we have a hard time justifying breaks in our day for the sake of taking a break. But we have learned that taking a break to eat is acceptable. And so I also think a lot of times we turn to food to justify taking a break. And so we're eating these things because we're exhausted mentally and physically, and we really just need a minute. But that's not, like, needing a minute isn't as acceptable. And so we sort of subconsciously are just like, oh, well, let me have a snack so I can take a break.
Yes, I noticed that in myself, working from home now going on 10 years, that I call it creating a pause. So if I'm hungry or I'm feeling like snacky or whatever, and I'm like, I'm just going to take a break and have a snack, I'll go outside first and I'll bathe in the sun for a couple of minutes and just like catch my breath, listen to like my favorite, like a song or a playlist, and then kind of just like reconnect to my body. Because when you're working, you're not like totally conscious, at least for myself. I'm not totally conscious of where I'm at. Like, I have to keep water beside me as I'm doing podcasting because I won't feel thirsty, but then all of a sudden I'll start coughing as I'm talking. And I'm like, oh, wait, I needed water. And the same thing happens with food, where I'll go too long and I won't be connected to my body. And I call it just creating a pause. Like, let's create a pause. Let's reconnect just a couple minutes. Okay, what do I need? And I agree with you on that. Like, we use food as a break.
And I love what you're saying about the thing. So one of the things that I recommend people do is like grab a Post-it. And by the way, you might need like 10 copies of this Post-it, but on the Post-it, write a list of things that you enjoy, things that probably sometimes you don't even often take the time for. Like, is it reading a book? Is it calling that friend? And like put their names down. Of like who to call. Like you said, go outside, fresh air, take a bath, listen to that song and put the name of the song, right? Like making this list on a Post-it note. And then put the Post-it note where we're going to see it when we have those moments. So if you're somebody too who like watches TV and has always grown up like at night after dinner, like you watch TV and you have this like extra snack. Right. And you realize now, like, I sit down and I have this craving for the popcorn or M&Ms, but like, I'm actually not hungry at all right now. We can put a copy of that Post-it or one Post-it with this list on the coffee table. So it's there to remind us. Like, I had a client once who put a Post-it on top of the pint of ice cream and on top of the cookie package so that it interrupts us. We see it when we're in that process, because expecting ourselves to remember these things in the moment is part of what feels like climbing Mount Everest naked and barefoot, right? So how can we just make it all easier? So I used to keep one of these Post-its on my computer screen at work. And like nobody else knew what it meant, but like I knew what the things were. And so like I could look at the Post-it, pick something and go do it for the 5 minutes or whatever it is. Creating some of those options and putting them in front of us can help tremendously. And it might be, by the way, this whole thing of getting to the point of the Post-it, like might be at the end of the process, right? The beginning of the process might be like, I'm not even going to say like, I'm not going to eat after dinner. What I'm going to say in the beginning is like, I'm just going to choose the healthier version of the sweet thing. So maybe it's berries. Maybe it's, Greek yogurt made into ice cream or a protein shake made into ice cream, right? Maybe that's the first piece. And we might live in that for a while. And then we might live in, okay, I'm actually going to switch that just for like some tea, like a non-caffeinated tea. And then we might say, wait a minute, I don't even need it to be food related now. Like I could actually switch that to being like 5 or 10 pages of a book, and so we progress and we work through it. We don't have to all of a sudden go from eating M&Ms and popcorn 3 nights a week to like sitting on our hands and telling ourselves that like reading a book or listening to, Pink is going to cut it, right? Like it takes time. And I think allowing ourselves that time and recognizing that it's a process is really important.
Yes, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. You're not going to go from 0 to 100 in 1 second. I mean, it's taken me so long. If I think back to 10 years ago, just even having those Post-its, I remember doing that very thing. And I would push the Post-it away and have the thing. Like it was just so beyond where I could be at that point of just like, I'm just going to ignore the Post-it. I'm just like in the zone, not thinking. And so if those tools aren't working, would you agree that a lot of times we think, well, I just need to try the tools more. Like instead of the tool is just beyond where you're at right now, or it's not serving you, or you need to look at it a different way because what you're doing right now is not working.
For sure. And I think that's where working with somebody else comes in and can be really, really helpful. Like you don't have to figure this out on your own. And yes, 100%, taking a couple steps back in the process and saying, what am I willing to do right now? And by the way, the thing you're willing to do right now might have nothing to do with the craving or the food. Maybe you just say, like, the thing I'm willing to do is have protein at breakfast. And I'll figure, right? Like, we don't have to tackle every single possible thing in the same moment. And oftentimes what happens is the one thing, like especially protein in the morning, quality fuel in the morning, can inherently take care of a lot of things that happen later in the day. And so I see it all the time where when we focus on sufficient fuel in the first half of the day and quality fuel in the first half of the day, a lot of the nighttime stuff just disappears. And we didn't have to, dig into it in that way. And then when that moment does show up, one of my favorite things, right? Like we can do the test of like, would I eat the broccoli? Would I eat an apple? Right? If the answer is no, and the only thing that sounds good is the thing, and we are in that place of being like, you know what? I kind of want to dig a little deeper. The question to ask is, where am I not being fed? Where am I not being fed? Am I lonely, like you said? Like, do I need connection? Do I need to just vent about this crazy thing that happened today that has me, sort of ruminating on it? Do I just need some quiet time? Like, am I so exhausted? Maybe I just actually need to go to sleep. And by the way, as long as, like, I just said that and it made me think too, like, especially for people with a lot of the nighttime hunger stuff, if you're starting to get a lot of cravings at night, there's also a piece of saying, are you actually just tired? Because when we are tired, but our body is getting signals of stay awake, which is coming from the fact that we are not in bed or not getting ready for bed, or we are staring at our phone or the computer or the TV, which are all blue light, which on the light spectrum, like 7th grade science light spectrum, blue light is the closest to daylight. And so our eyes are getting daylight signals. Our brain and our body are exhausted. That disconnect of daylight signal to the eye means I'm supposed to be awake and energized. I don't feel that way. I need food in order to feel that way. I need fuel. And at that, I'm going to tell you that I need fast fuel, right? I'm going to need the higher glycemic things. And so there's oftentimes a lot of other things going on that we interpret as, I just have this thing that I can't deal with. And so I think going back to your original question, is like there are steps back in the process. There are dots to connect. We don't always have to go to the thing that's super deep.
Yeah, I love that recommendation. I want to share something that has truly transformed my daily routine and overall well-being. Timeline Nutrition's Mida Pure supplement. I've been taking it for about a year now. And let me tell you, it's been a game changer. The energy boost I get is incredible. Not only do I sleep better, but I can also push harder in the gym and recover faster. It's so strong. I can only take one capsule a day. Now, here's why MidoPure is so effective. It's developed by Timeline, a Swiss-based life science company that's a global leader in urolithin research. After 10 years of development, they created MidoPure, the first product to offer a precise dose of urolithin A, a powerful postbiotic that upgrades your mitochondrial function, increases cellular energy, and improves muscle strength and endurance. Here's the best part. Timeline is offering 10% off your first order of MitoPure. Just go to timeline.com/KDP. That's TIMELINE.com/KDP for 10% off your first order. Give it a try and see the difference for yourself. One thing that you touched on too in that, what I see a lot of the times is women wanting to do like the intermittent fasting thing, or they're just so busy that they don't think to eat until like 2 p.m.
And then we call it intermittent fasting.
Yeah, we call it intermittent fasting. Yeah, like it starts off as something and then morphs into something else. But how many clients actually stop craving food when they start eating food in the morning?
So intermittent fasting, everything starts with everything starts with the foundation of some really awesome science. And then it kind of gets blown up and butchered, especially for women. I'm not the biggest fan of intermittent fasting the way people talk about it now. So let's just back up common sense for a second. A vast majority of the planet, forget it. Let's just take the US, but this applies across the world, right? The US, there are about 8% of people who are metabolically healthy, which means that their body is properly functioning, right? 8% of people. If 92% of people given 24 hours a day cannot get the nutrition into their system that the body needs, that's not the problem. And how we think that we're going to get all the nutrition the body needs in a smaller and smaller and smaller window of time, just sort of like common sense, I'm like, I don't think so. And understanding also how the body works, there are only a handful of things that we hold on to as they are. If we don't, there are other things where if we don't use them when we need them, we get rid of them or they turn into fat. So just logically of understanding how the body works, I think we've sort of misconstrued where intermittent fasting really supports health. And keeping it simple, for women and our hormones, we need nutrients. Full stop. Our hormones are such that we really do not want to fast like a man. It's not going to work for our system. The kind of fasting that I'm a really big fan of is ending food 2 to 3 hours before bed. If you are a woman and you are in that phase of life, like all of us are, right? 40 plus, perimenopause, menopause, we might want to make that 4 hours before bed. Ending food 4 hours before bed, and then starting food within an hour to 90 minutes of waking up. That's your fasting window. So let's say you go to bed at 11, you end food at like 7, 8, you wake up at like 6:37, you're at about 12 hours, give or take. We want our fasting time to be when we sleep. We want our waking time to be when we fuel, and then ending the day, right? Ending fuel maybe a little earlier before bed for that phase of life stuff.
Yes, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. I would say it's probably a bold statement, but I would say 100% of my clients, when they come to me and they're intermittent fasting and or not eating enough, and they're telling me I'm metabolically challenged, that's why I fast, and I beg them to eat at maintenance for a certain period of time, 100% of the time they experience way more benefits, like 100% of the time. Like,
yes.
Always.
Same, over and over. We are not underfed. We are undernourished.
Yeah.
And I think intermittent fasting is implemented in such a way that it is calorie control rather than actually giving our body rest that it needs.
Right, because we're already undernourished. We're already undereating. We might not be undereating, but we're undernourished. And so by maintenance eating and nourishing well, you have a completely different result, which is usually the results you want, which is less cravings and all of the benefits that come with that. I couldn't agree with you more. Are there other mistakes that you find individuals making when it comes to just understanding their cravings? Like we talked about the fasting piece and the undernourishment piece, the lack of nutrients, the chemicals in the food. Do you see clients making the same mistakes over and over and over, that it's just a quick win to shift their behavior or their thought patterns?
Yeah, I think the quick win is actually not hyper focusing on the craving. The quick win is recognizing that the body is going to crave sugar when what it really needs is protein. That we're going to be hungrier later in the day if we undereat in the first half of the day. So if we can focus on a solid breakfast and setting an alarm to remind us to eat something during the day, a lot of these other cravings are going to just disappear. And you're going to be like, what? That's so crazy. I thought I was nuts. You're not, right? As we know, and we talked about, like, it's biochemical in the body. If we start to give the body what it needs, it's not going to send us those same signals. So honestly, protein, vegetables or fruit, quality fat in the morning is the easy button to start to resolve cravings. And by the way, a serving of protein for a female body at a meal is 4 to 6 ounces. So that's like your whole hand. If you are reading a label, that is 28 plus grams of protein. 2 eggs, no bueno. That's a snack. 4 eggs, now we've got a meal. Or 2 eggs plus maybe some nuts that have a little bit of protein and some quality fat, plus, maybe some Greek yogurt or cottage cheese with the eggs or whatever, right? Like it doesn't all have to come from one source. But I also think a lot of people, because we all have such a history of eat less, move more, understanding what sufficient fuel looks like requires a little bit more conversation and a little bit of effort.
Yes. Personal story. I share my meals on Instagram, and I mean, I'm eating a significant amount because I'm training for a pretty epic hike experience in the next couple of months. So I am eating
good for you.
Thank you. I'm eating like a good amount, but I have ladies when I'm eating around a 500 calorie meal, which that's not a ton of food in one meal. I'll have women say, there's no way I could eat that much. Like, you eat so much. And I'm like, this is actually not that big of a meal. Like, in the grand scheme of meals, this is not a ginormous meal. I think we just have it so backwards. And that kind of like leads me to my next question, which is, we're talking a lot about eating more and being, choosing differently. There's a lot of anxiety, and I'm sure that you experience this with your clients. And I know I do with mine too, where I'm telling them, like, this is not enough food. You're not eating enough food. If you want to get to these goals, you need to eat more. And their brains just cannot comprehend, how will I get to my goal? How will I have less cravings? How will I stop eating if I'm eating more? I'm trying to understand, and I can't, every single time I do a check-in with a client, I have to reassure them, even though they're experiencing benefits, I have to reassure them we're on the right track. Do you see that as well? And kind of what's your process to helping them with that?
Yeah, a little bit. Part of it is because we don't track calories or macros or any of those kinds of things. We really just talk about servings, right? So did I have 4 to 6 ounces of protein at a meal, 2 to 3 ounces at a snack, am I getting 8 to 12 servings or handfuls of vegetables in a day? right? And by the way, like a serving of vegetables is like a handful. Unless it's greens, it's 2 handfuls. Are we getting those? Are we getting 2 to 3 quality fats a day? So we're looking at more like, are we ticking the boxes of what the body needs and how you want to get that in, right? Like sometimes it's different day to day. Sometimes it's, I have a really long meeting, so I need to eat a bigger meal because I need it to last me longer, right? And we can start to connect those dots. So there's a piece of that. The other piece to this specific point is also in terms of what we're measuring and how we're measuring progress. So what you'll see is that if you are in that place of resisting eating more, you're going to see the number on the scale go down and no change or even an increase in that body fat percentage. It's the difference between quote unquote losing weight and removing fat. So that's always my concern when I see that of we're not eating enough and afraid to eat more, right? It's still coming from a place of not understanding how the body functions and how the different foods are meeting the body's needs. And if our body doesn't get what it needs, what's it going to do? It holds on to everything it gets because the body's goal is survival always, right? So I think I said this at the very beginning, like the body is always doing exactly what it is supposed to do. Always, right? Like we have a fever, the body's doing what it's supposed to do. It's fighting the infection. It's fighting the germ. It's heating up to kill the germ, to kill the bacteria, whatever it is. We're holding on to weight. We don't want to fight with the body. We want to be on the same team. So let's understand why. Why is it holding on to everything? It feels like it's fighting for survival. Well, why does my body feel like it's fighting for survival? Oh, because I'm not giving it what it needs. Because I'm not sending it signals that it's safe. Sleep. I'm not managing the stress. I'm not taking deep breaths. I'm not picking up heavy things and putting them back down again, right? Like all of the things that we can do to send the signals to the body that it can release that fat, that it can release that extra weight. So especially when it comes to, weight management being the goal, recognize that health is of primary importance. And the difference between the scale going down and health is critical because health is not a size, health is not a number. And so we want to start to shift what we're measuring, how we're measuring progress. That was a very long answer to a short question. Sorry.
No, it's great. I love it. I love it because you're taking us through like the whole process. And I couldn't agree with you more. Something when I get stuck on certain aspects, because I still do, even to this day, like eating more and moving my body, and I'm so much stronger and I'm so grateful. I do have these moments where I'm like, oh, but I want the scale to look XYZ. And I remind myself, I don't want to be that 75-year-old woman who's still caring more about what I look like than my life experiences, than my mitochondria being healthy, then, those key things that are going to keep me walking and talking and thinking into my 70s, 80s, 90s. It really, really helps me gain perspective. And I think that's different for everyone. But I know for me, like, I don't want to be 7 years old caring about what the number says on the scale.
And I don't know about you, and I always end up in a fight with the medical system on this when it comes to weight management and the medical system, but I only recommend that people take their weight or measurements once a month. We have to divorce the scale. If you're in an everyday situation, and this might need to be a whole other episode onto itself, right? Like if you're an everyday step on the scale kind of person, start with once a week, then go to every other week. But we want to get to a place of once a month. And anytime we take one measurement, we take all of the measurements, which is total weight, body fat percentage, and all the tape measurements. So just like with blood work from the doctor, we don't want to look at one marker in isolation. We also don't want to look at one measurement in isolation. So anytime we take one, we take all of them and we look at everything in context.
I agree with you on the everything in context. As like a macro coach or somebody who works with body composition, it's crazy. So I was in that realm of like, I broke my scale. I didn't use it for years. And I absolutely needed that in order to heal my brain. Like it was so toxic. And now I'm doing measurements and jumping on the scale every day. And I see it go up, down, up, down. Like I can gain 5 pounds overnight. And it's
Except
just water
that's
weight.
Not, right. I was just going to say, that's not 5 pounds of muscle, and it's not 5 pounds of fat. Like we have to, and that also speaks to what's the goal, right?
Yes.
If your goal is this weight management piece versus where you are right now, you are training for something. So those measurements are another piece of feedback for how you're going to adapt your training, which is a very different place to be. And that's also part of why for everybody, like, know the plan that you're on and put the blinders on a little bit, because what you're eating, what I'm eating has nothing to do with what you might need to be eating.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. Like, what's the goal?
And what your friend is having or not having or whatever. And intermittent fasting. And like this also, like you were talking about mitochondria, and like another sort of debunking of things, biohacking is by definition a 10% improvement. The baseline assumption is that you are already well. It is that extra 10% to go from 90 to 99. So I say to everybody, like I did an episode, The Ultimate Biohack, which is really just about sleep. Like
basics.
You can ditch your ice bath. You can ditch the intermittent fasting, focus on sleep.
Yeah.
Like if we're at 10%, a 10% improvement gets us to 11. Like, right? Like the underlying assumption of our starting point is often forgotten. And so if we are trying to do the biohack, it will always be one step forward, 2 steps back, because you will never ice bath your way out of poor nutrition, lack of stress management, and no sleep.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. Yes, totally yes. So as we approach like the holiday season and we're kind of in it, I know that you put together like a little freebie. Can you tell us about how that relates to our conversation and managing the holidays and where people can find that resource for people who want to go deeper?
Yeah, 100%. So I am all about eat all the things and enjoy them all. The question, right? Like there is no shortage of information out there, and nobody needs to tell you to eat a carrot stick instead of, the candy cane. Like, duh, right? The question is, how do we enjoy the holiday dessert, enjoy the holiday parties, and have them not impact us the same way that they do right now? Because none of us are going to go the rest of our lives never enjoying the holidays, never eating those indulgent things, or never celebrating a birthday, right? So the trick is to understand how to eat and enjoy those things and have them not impact us. So the freebie is called, it's not what to eat, it's how to eat. If you go to my website, asaladwithasideofries.com, there's a pop-up and it'll be right there for you. If you close the pop-up, you can go to the bottom of the pages and get the freebie. Or send me a message and be like, I can't get it. And I'll get it to you.
Awesome. Awesome. And your Instagram, I'll include a link in the show notes if people want to connect with you on Instagram, and your URL to access your website. Anything else that you feel like we didn't touch on that you want to share with listeners today to just give them a little bit of encouragement through this process?
Yeah, I think we've talked about a lot. Pick one thing. Do one thing. If what you do is have an extra ounce of water every day this December, like that's a win. And that is valuable and progress, right? We want this December to look just a little bit healthier than last December. And if we're there, that's the name of the game. You're not alone. It's all going to be fine, right? We can tackle anything together. So you don't have to figure this out alone, I guess would be the other piece. So reach out to me or you, reach out. We are here for you and can help you get from where you are to where you want to be.
Absolutely. Jenn, thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you. I love this. We could talk forever.
Absolutely. We didn't even talk about how I was a dancer too, so we'll have to have you back on. I hope you enjoyed our time with Jenn. You can check out her holiday eating guide by going to saladwithasideoffries.com. And you can follow Jenn on Instagram by going to Instagram at Jenn, that's Jenn Trepeck, Trepeck. Okay, we'll see you back here for another episode. Can't wait. Bye. Thanks for listening to the Healthful Pursuit Podcast. Join us next Tuesday for another episode of the show. If you're looking for free resources, there are a couple of places you can go. The first to my blog, healthfulpursuit.com, where you're going to find loads of recipes. The second is a free parasite protocol that I've put together for you that outlines symptoms, testing, and resources to determine whether or not you have a parasite, plus a full protocol to follow to eradicate them from your life if you need to. That's available at healthfulpursuit.com/parasites. And last but certainly not least, a full list of blood work markers to ask your doctor for so that you can get a full picture of your health. You can grab that free resource by going to healthfulpursuit.com/labs. The Healthful Pursuit Podcast, including show notes and links, provides information in respect to healthy living, recipes, nutrition, and diet, and is intended for informational purposes only. The information provided is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, nor is it to be construed as such. We cannot guarantee that the information provided on the Healthful Pursuit Podcast reflects the most up-to-date medical research. Information is provided without any representation or warranties of any kind. Please consult a qualified health practitioner with any questions you may have regarding your health and nutrition program.